Welcome back. It is Thursday, February 12th, 2026. And if you've been trying to drink from the fire hose of news over the last, 6 weeks, you are probably exhausted.
Exhausted is, I think, putting it mildly. It feels like the entire information ecosystem has just been, well, detonated.
Yeah, detonated is a good word. We are drowning in paper.
Yeah.
Literally millions and millions of pages released in such a short window of time. And somewhere in the middle of all that noise,
Yeah.
the redactions, the hot takes, the cable news screaming matches, is the truth.
Or we hope it's there.
We hope it's there.
It is there, I think, but it's buried. It's buried under just layers and layers of bureaucracy and, frankly, of myth-making.
Exactly. And that's why today we're shaking up the format a little bit. We aren't just doing a standard analysis. We're calling this the road trip.
I like that framing. I do. Because usually when we look at a topic, we dive into one specific pool of information. But the Jeffrey Epstein saga, especially when you look at it from our vantage point now here in 2026, it's not a pool. It's a sprawling, messy landscape. It covers finance, it covers politics, science.
All of it.
And it all ends in a very cold, very concrete room in Manhattan.
So imagine we're in the car, we've got the map, which honestly looks like it was drawn by a madman, and we're just driving through the wreckage of this entire story to see what's actually still standing.
And our destination, is trying to get a clearer understanding of two fundamental things, the network and the death.
So here's the central question we're really tackling today. After the passage of the Epstein Files Transparency Act, after this chaotic release of, 3.5 million pages of documents, now here in early 2026, do we actually know the truth?
It is the question that just refuses to go away, isn't it? And I think for a lot of people, the expectation was that this massive release would be the final chapter.
Yeah, the end of the story.
The period at the end of the sentence.
But it feels more like an ellipsis, doesn't it? Like,
yes,
to be continued.
It absolutely does. And that is exactly what we need to unpack today.
Okay, so here's our mission for this trip. We are going to sift through all of that noise. We're going to look at the massive document dump from January, the logistics of it, the failures, which were significant. We're going to look at the money, because it turns out that whole trading genius narrative was largely a fabrication.
And we're going to dismantle the client list myth. That's a big one. We have to separate that from the reality of the Black Book, because that distinction right there is where most of the public gets lost.
Absolutely. And then we are going to the jail cell, because there is new evidence, forensic details, video log discrepancies, and a certain orange figure on a staircase.
Yeah.
That makes the official suicide narrative incredibly complicated.
And I think we need to set a ground rule right up front.
Please.
This is an evidence-based discussion. We are not here to do the partisan finger-pointing thing. That's everywhere else. We're not here to endorse a political side. We are looking at the documents, the autopsy reports, the surveillance logs. That's it.
We're separating the verified facts from the convenient narratives.
Yep.
That's the goal. So let's put the car in drive. Section 1 of our road trip, the 2026 document release.
Okay. So to really understand what we're all looking at now, we have to understand how we even got here. And this all started with the Epstein Files Transparency Act, or EFT, as people call it.
This was the legislative push, the one led by Representative Ro Khanna and Representative Thomas Massie.
Right. And that bipartisan nature is so important to remember. You had the progressive left and the libertarian right agreeing, finally, on one single thing. The Department of Justice cannot keep sitting on these files.
For years, what was the argument from the DOJ? It was always ongoing investigations or these generic privacy concerns, right?
Exactly. Those were the two pillars of their argument. But by late 2025, that excuse had really, really worn thin. The public pressure was just boiling over. You couldn't ignore it anymore.
So the act passes. The DOJ is legally mandated to hand over everything. And when we say everything, we're talking about 3.5 million pages of responsive documents.
It's just an avalanche. It's almost an incomprehensible amount of information to just dump on the public.
Well, let's talk about the execution of that dump, that release in January 2026, because calling it a disaster feels like a very plague word for it.
It was a logistical catastrophe, a complete unmitigated catastrophe. And it's a cautionary tale about modern governance, really. The DOJ had this hard deadline from Congress to release these millions of pages.
And they just didn't have the people to do it.
They didn't have the manpower to read every single line in the time they were given. It was impossible.
So they turned to AI. Is that right?
They did. They relied very heavily on AI redaction tools, which were then, supplemented by a very rushed manual review process. And the AI it failed. spectacularly.
How bad was the failure? I mean, give us a sense of the scale.
It was bad. We're talking about thousands of victim names being exposed, names that should never have seen the light of day.
Oh, wow.
These are people who were minors at the time of the abuse, people whose identities were supposed to be sealed by court order forever. The software completely missed context clues. It missed handwriting. It missed pseudonyms that any human reviewer would have caught in a second.
I read a statement from one of the lawyers for the victims in the civil cases. They called it a horrific privacy violation.
It absolutely is, and it creates this just terrible, terrible irony. The whole point of the Epstein Files Transparency Act was to provide some measure of justice, or at least truth, for the victims and for the public.
Sure.
But the sheer incompetence of the release ended up victimizing those women all over again. It's just tragic.
It really feels like the government just dumped all the data out there to say, look, we did it, and then just washed their hands of the consequences.
It highlights this fundamental tension between transparency and privacy. We all scream from the sidelines, release the files. But real files, they contain sensitive, damaging information about innocent people, not just the perpetrators. And the government, in this specific instance, completely failed to balance that equation. It's like they didn't even try.
Okay, so let's shift to what people expected to find versus what they actually found. Because I think, 90% of the internet was just refreshing their screens, waiting for a document titled The Client List.
The mythical client list. I think people literally imagined a neat Excel spreadsheet, maybe printed on heavy bond paper with columns for name, date, and illegal act.
Right, like an invoice.
Yeah.
And we need to clarify this immediately right off the top. No such single document exists.
It does not exist. And this isn't new information, really. The DOJ and the FBI, they even issued a memo way back in July of 2025, which was sort of a precursor to this huge release. And they stated explicitly, and I'm quoting here, that they did not uncover evidence that could predicate an investigation against uncharged third parties.
And they also said that no client list exists.
They said it in black and white. No client list exists.
Which, of course, just made everyone furious. It sounded like a massive cover-up.
Of course it did. Because to a skeptic, and I think we're all skeptics at this point, we didn't find it. Sounds a lot like we hid it. But let's just look at this practically for a second. Criminals, especially sophisticated criminals, they very rarely keep a detailed ledger of their co-conspirators labeled my co-conspirators.
That would be bad for business.
That's not how leverage works. That's not how any of this works.
Okay, so if there is no single client list,
Yeah.
what do we actually have? What are the documents that people are combing through?
We have two primary sources of names. We have the flight logs, which we've known about for years, and we have the infamous Little Black Book.
And this is where that incredible Mother Jones investigation comes in. I found this absolutely fascinating because they didn't just speculate. They actually did the legwork.
It's an incredible piece of journalism. It really is. Instead of just, breathlessly listing the famous names in the Black Book, a journalist actually sat down and called them.
How many?
About 2,000 calls.
2,000 calls. That's dedication.
It is. And the insight they walked away with, I think, completely changes how we should view Epstein's network. The Black Book is not a list of co-conspirators. It's a Rolodex of social climbing.
I loved the quote from that article. It really stuck with me. They said they realized if Epstein wasn't this mastermind scammer hacking the elite, the real conclusion was that the elite world is just grifters, grifting grifters all the way down.
That is the key aha moment of this whole thing. It was transactional. The investigation found that so many of the people in that book didn't even know him well. Or if they did, they just thought he was some, vaguely shady witch guy who threw good parties.
There was that one reaction that came up again and again where people described him as cagey.
Right. A lot of his contacts thought he was cagey, or, surprisingly, not even that bright.
Really? Not bright.
No. There's this great anecdote about an interview he did, where the interviewer noted that Epstein didn't really seem to have any of his own opinions. He just asked questions.
The quote was that he asked the kind of questions a young comic would ask, just sort of probing for information.
Exactly. He wasn't some intellectual titan. He was a mirror. He just reflected back whatever the person he was with wanted to see. If he was with a scientist, he acted intensely curious about science. If he was with a politician, suddenly he was interested in policy.
So if the Black Book is really just a list of people he was trying to impress or trying to use, that explains the sheer volume of names. It explains why you have Nobel Prize winners mixed in with, random European socialites.
It was all social currency. He collected people the way some other people collect stamps or art. But, and this is a really big but, just because the book itself is in a criminal list doesn't mean there weren't criminals in it.
Right.
It just means you can't assume someone is guilty solely based on their presence in the book. It's a map of ambition, not necessarily a map of crime.
Well, speaking of ambition, let's move to section 2 of our road trip. The mechanics of power, and specifically, the money. Because for the longest time, the myth was that Jeffrey Epstein was some kind of financial wizard.
Oh, yeah, the hedge fund manager. That was the title that was always attached to his name in the press for, 20 years.
But was he? Was he actually a hedge fund manager?
The evidence from these 2026 files suggests no, not in the way we typically think of one. When he died, his estate was valued at around $578 million.
Which is an enormous amount of money.
A staggering amount of money. But how he actually got it is where the story gets really strange.
Forbes did a pretty deep dive into this, right? They were one of the first to really debunk the idea that he was some kind of trading genius.
They were. They analyzed the flows of money in and out of his accounts, and a normal hedge fund manager, what they do is they take a client's capital, they invest it in the market, they make a profit, and then they take a percentage of that profit.
Standard 2 and 20 model.
Right, Epstein. He didn't really do that. The money trails don't show that kind of activity.
So where did the $578 million come from?
Well, all roads seem to lead back to a very small number of key figures. Les Wexner, the retail mogul behind Victoria's Secret, was his main and for a long time only client. But then you have Leon Black.
The head of Apollo Global Management. A giant in the financial world.
A giant, correct. And the numbers here are they're staggering. The financial forensics that came out in these documents show that Leon Black paid Jeffrey Epstein $158 million.
Okay, let's just pause on that number. $158 million. In the world of high finance, you're a billionaire, you have advisors. Is that a normal fee for a financial advisor?
No, absolutely not. It is so far outside the norm, it's a statistical anomaly.
Explain that to me. If I'm a billionaire and I hired the best top-tier firm in the world to handle my entire estate, what am I paying?
Even for the most complex international high-stakes estate planning you can possibly imagine, you might pay $10 million, maybe $20 million if it spans a decade and involves massive legal restructuring across multiple countries.
Okay.
But $158 million to one guy. It's off the charts.
Now, there was an official report that tried to justify this, right? The Deschert report.
Yes, this was an independent review that was commissioned by Apollo's board to investigate Black's ties to Epstein after all this came out.
And what did it say about the $158 million?
The report concluded that these were legitimate fees for bona fide tax estate planning services. And their argument, essentially, was that Epstein's advice saved Leon Black nearly $2 billion in taxes.
Okay, so if I saved you $2 billion, paying me $158 million, I mean, the math seems, I guess, mathematically rational. It's a great return on investment.
In a purely mathematical vacuum, yes. If you spend $150 to save $2,000, that's a winning trade. But experts in the field, tax attorneys and estate planners, they point out that just because the ratio makes a certain kind of sense doesn't mean the fee structure makes any sense at all. You just don't pay an individual advisor that kind of massive lump sum for advice. It doesn't happen.
So was the money for advice or was it money for something else?
That is the question that just hangs over this entire money trail. And the Deschert report, we have to state this clearly, it found no evidence of Black's involvement in any of Epstein's criminal activities.
Right.
But the sheer weirdness, the discrepancy in the fees, it keeps the speculation alive. It strongly suggests that Epstein's real value wasn't in picking stocks. It was in his ability to navigate the very gray areas of international tax law and estate planning.
So he wasn't a wolf of Wall Street?
No, he wasn't a trader. He was a loophole artist. He knew how to move money around the world in ways that made it, effectively invisible to the IRS. That is a very specific and a very, very lucrative skill set.
A loophole artist. I like that description. But he didn't just collect money. He collected brains. He collected legitimacy. And we have to talk about the science of influence.
This was his camouflage. This was the brilliant part of his con, if you want to call it that. He cultivated these very public relationships with some of the world's most renowned scientists.
Why? What did that get him?
It gave him an air of legitimacy that money alone just can't buy. You can be a rich guy and still be considered, trashy or new money. But if you're hanging out with Nobel Prize winners, if you're funding their research, you're a philanthropist. You're a patron of the sciences.
We're talking about people like Lawrence Krauss, the physicist.
Right. Lawrence Krauss, a well-known theoretical physicist, he received $250,000 from Epstein. And the emails that came out in the 2026 release show something really interesting. When allegations of sexual misconduct started swirling around Krauss himself, Epstein was in his inbox, emailing him, advising him to just say no comment.
So he wasn't just a donor. He was coaching him on crisis PR.
Exactly. He was managing the crisis for him. It shows a much deeper relationship.
And Lisa Randall, the Harvard physicist, she was involved too.
She visited the island in 2014.
And even Stephen Hawking, his name comes up.
Yes, Stephen Hawking is mentioned in some of the emails regarding, and this is one of the more bizarre details in this entire saga, debunking rumors about orgies on the island.
I'm sorry, why would Stephen Hawking be involved in debunking orgy rumors?
The email suggests that Epstein wanted to leverage Hawking's presence or maybe get a statement from him to dispel these rumors. The point is, Epstein used these connections, these brilliant minds, to mask his true nature.
It's a shield.
It's a perfect shield. If you're hosting a conference on gravity or quantum mechanics on your private island, people are much less likely to look at these suspiciously young girls serving drinks in the background.
It's the science of influence as a defense mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
He built a fortress of respectability, but he built it out of other people's reputations.
Precisely. And that fortress, it protected him for a very, very long time. It made him seem, in certain social circles, too big to fail.
Until he wasn't. Which brings us to Section 3 of this trip, the political fallout. Because now that the fortress has finally crumbled, everyone is pointing fingers at everyone else.
Oh, it has become total political weaponization. And this is where the road trip gets really bumpy, because the partisan spin on all this is just, it's out of control.
Okay, let's look at the big names. We have to start with Donald Trump.
We do, and we have to look at it in the context of 2025 and 2026. Trump has been on the defensive about these files for months. When the release was imminent, his reaction was to claim that the files were fake or they'd been manipulated. He said they were written by Obama, crooked Hillary, and the losers of the Biden administration.
Which is, well, it's a claim.
It's a rhetorical defense. It's what you'd expect. But the facts in the files, they show a long history. We see the flight logs from the 90s. We see the photos of them socializing in the 90s and early 2000s. We know they had a falling out later, reportedly over a property dispute. But the connections, they were definitely there.
And then there was that DOJ memo from July 2025. This was, we should remember, under the Trump administration with Pam Bondi at the Department of Justice.
Correct. And that memo is so fascinating because it stated officially that there was no evidence of a client list and no evidence of a murder. And this actually caused a massive backlash among Trump's own base. You had people like Alex Jones literally crying on his show. You had Joe Rogan heavily criticizing the administration for gaslighting its own supporters.
Because the base expected this huge drain the swamp moment. They expected Trump's DOJ to release a list of all their political enemies.
And instead, they got an official document that basically said, nothing to see here. It just goes to show how this issue cuts across all the normal party lines. The base, on both sides, wants accountability. And when their political leaders, even their own, don't deliver, they get furious.
Okay, and then on the other side of the aisle, you have Bill Clinton.
The evidence there has been remarkably consistent for years. The flight logs show multiple trips on Epstein's plane. There are the photos. But the Black Book gave us a new, very specific, very granular detail regarding Doug Band, his top advisor.
The phone number, right. The number listed for Doug Band was his childhood home.
His childhood home. And that just shows the depth of the integration. It wasn't just, oh, I met him at a party once. If you have the childhood home phone number of a former president's top aide in your personal Rolodex, that implies a level of access that is incredibly rare.
And we can't ignore the tech world in all this. Elon Musk's name came up.
This one generated a lot of headlines from the 2026 release. There were emails that surfaced from 2012 where Musk was inquiring about either a kung fu practice or the wildest party on the island.
Now, to be fair, Musk has always denied acting on it. He denies visiting for that purpose.
He has. And there is no flight log evidence that places him on the island for a party. We need to be clear about that. But the email inquiry itself, just asking the question, shows that the reputation of the island and what happened there was known. It was part of the brand.
That's the key point, isn't it? Even back in 2012, people knew.
It was an open secret, a very, very open secret. If you were in those elite circles, you knew Epstein was the guy with the wild parties and the young girls. It wasn't a mystery.
And of course, Prince Andrew.
The fallout there just continues. The "I don't recall" defenses, the disastrous interview, and the very specific, very graphic allegations from Virginia Giuffre. He remains, I think, the most high-profile single figure whose reputation has been completely and utterly destroyed by this, even without a criminal conviction in the U.S.
It's just a mess, a bipartisan, global, wealthy mess. But all of these people, the politicians, the scientists, the billionaires, they're all still alive. Jeffrey Epstein is not.
And that right there brings us to the darkest part of this road trip. Section 4, the death of Jeffrey Epstein.
Okay. August 10th, 2019. The official narrative is, and has always been, suicide by hanging. The New York Medical Examiner ruled it a suicide. The DOJ and the FBI officially confirmed that finding again in 2025.
That is the official stamp. Case closed according to the United States government.
But the skeptics, they are legion. The Epstein didn't kill himself meme isn't just a joke anymore. It's a cultural phenomenon. It crosses every single political line. You see it everywhere.
And for very good reason. When you start to look at the actual forensic evidence, specifically the details that Dr. Michael Baden pointed out, the official story gets, well, it gets very shaky very fast.
So let's break down Baden's findings. He was a forensic pathologist hired by Epstein's brother, Mark, to observe the official autopsy. So he's in the room. What did he see that the government seems to have glossed over?
There are three main things that he focuses on. First, and most importantly, the hyoid bone. Epstein had multiple fractures in his hyoid bone and also in his thyroid cartilage.
Why is that so significant?
Well, Baden argues, quite forcefully, that these specific types of fractures are much more consistent with homicidal strangulation than they are with a suicidal hanging.
Now, to be fair to the other side, can hyoid fractures happen in hangings?
Yes, they can happen, particularly in older people where the bone has become more brittle, but it is statistically much, much more common in cases of manual strangulation. It's a big red flag for a pathologist.
Okay, what was the second point? The noose.
The noose itself, this is a big one. The noose found in the cell was made of torn bed sheets. It was wide and soft. But the ligature furrow, that's the mark on Epstein's neck, it didn't match the width or character of that noose.
So the weapon that was found at the scene didn't match the wound on the body?
It didn't seem to. And, critically, Baden noted that the noose was too clean. There was no visible blood or DNA transfer on the noose itself that you would expect to see from the way the neck wound looked. If that sheet caused that deep, bloody wound, it should have carried biological evidence of that contact.
And the third point was the wound location.
Right. Baden pointed out that the mark was almost horizontal, right in the middle of the neck. In most hangings, gravity pulls the body down, and so the noose slides up to right under the jawbone. It creates an inverted V shape at the back of the neck.
I see.
A horizontal mark in the middle of the neck is, again, often consistent with being strangled from behind with something like a wire or a cord.
So Baden's expert analysis, as a man who's done thousands of autopsies, is that the medical evidence points much more to murder.
He's careful. He hesitates to give a final, definitive opinion without access to all the evidence, but yes, he leans very heavily toward homicide based on the forensic findings from the body itself.
But here is where it gets really, really interesting. And this is the new stuff that came out of the 2026 release. The story of the orange figure.
This is the detail that, honestly, it kept me up last night rereading it. This is the smoking gun of confusion in this case.
Let's break this down very carefully. We are looking at the video logs from the surveillance cameras on the night of August 9th, 2019.
Right. Specifically, the camera covering the staircase that leads to the SHU, the special housing unit where Epstein was held.
And there is a major discrepancy between what the FBI agents who first reviewed the video saw and what the Office of the Inspector General, OIG, saw later.
A massive discrepancy. The initial FBI log notes a flash of orange at 10:39 p.m., and their description of this flash of orange is possibly an inmate.
Possibly an inmate in the special housing unit at 10:39 at night.
Which should absolutely not be happening. It's a major breach of protocol.
But the OIG report, which was the one that was later released to the public to sort of explain away all the conspiracy theories, it describes the exact same figure at the exact same time as an officer carrying orange linen. Okay, hold on. So one federal agency says it's a person in an orange jumpsuit. The other later report says it's a guard carrying orange laundry. Why does this matter so much?
It matters because of the timeline in prison protocol. Prison employees who were interviewed for the investigation stated that escorting an inmate around the SHU at that hour, 10:39 p.m., would be highly, highly unusual. The SHU is locked down for the night. It's supposed to be quiet. You don't just move inmates around for fun at nearly 11 o'clock at night.
So if it was an inmate entering that tier at 10:03 and 9 p.m., that puts someone else on the scene much closer to the time of death.
Exactly. It completely breaks the isolation timeline that is central to the suicide theory. And the fact that the official OIG report changed the description to linen it feels very convenient. It explains away the color orange without having to admit an unauthorized inmate was there. It's a direct conflict in the official record that has never been adequately resolved.
And then on top of that, we have the missing minute.
The camera malfunction. Or malfunction, depending on how cynical you are.
The footage from the camera pointing at his cell door cuts out from just before 11:59 p.m. to midnight. One crucial minute.
The FBI released what they called the raw footage, and it has this cut in it. But some sources have suggested that a continuous, unedited copy might exist somewhere. The question is, why is that specific minute missing from the only version the public gets to see? And why is it right around the time of the guard shift change?
It all feels like a series of glitches. But all of the glitches seem to go in one direction. They all serve to obscure the truth.
That is usually how you spot a cover-up. Random error is chaotic. It goes in all directions. Directed error, however, is specific and purposeful. We have a missing minute of video, a disputed figure on the stairs, guards who were sleeping, and a dead man with a broken hyoid bone. It's a lot of coincidences.
Which brings us to Section 5. Because even if you don't believe it was murder, even if you accept the official story, you have to admit that the system failed spectacularly. We have to talk about what one judge called the tale of national disgrace.
That phrase, tale of national disgrace, it comes from a very specific and a very important legal battle. It involves the 2007 non-prosecution agreement, the MPA.
This goes all the way back to the original Florida case, the infamous sweetheart deal.
The deal of the century. Jeffrey Epstein and his potential co-conspirators, all of them, were granted immunity from federal prosecution. It was an incredibly, almost unbelievably broad immunity deal. But the real kicker is, the government didn't tell the victims about this deal until after it was already signed.
They kept the victims completely in the dark.
Yes. Deliberately. They negotiated with Epstein's team of high-priced lawyers entirely in secret. And this issue, it went all the way to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. The central question was, did the government violate the Crime Victims' Rights Act, the CVRA?
And what was the ruling?
It was a split decision, which is telling in itself. The majority ruled that the CVRA only legally applies after criminal proceedings are instituted, meaning after charges are formally filed. Since this immunity deal was made pre-charge, the court found that the victims technically had no statutory right to be informed.
That sounds incredibly legalistic and just brutally cold.
It is the coldest kind of legal logic. It's a loophole. We hadn't charged him yet, so you don't have any rights yet.
And that's why Judge Hull's dissent in that case is so powerful and so widely quoted.
Yes, Judge Hull wrote a blistering dissent. She called the entire situation a national disgrace. She said the deal was hidden by affirmative misrepresentations. Basically, she said the government lied to the victims to protect a powerful pedophile and his friends.
And that failure of the legal system back in 2007, that original fin, it really set the stage for the catastrophic failure of the custody system in 2019.
It's a direct line. You can draw a straight line from one to the other. The system protected him in life, and then it completely failed to monitor him in the hours before his death.
Let's just review the night of the death one more time. The custody failures alone are damning.
It's a laundry list of unbelievable incompetence. First, Epstein was taken off suicide watch, which is baffling in itself, given his previous attempt, or what was called an incident, just a few weeks earlier.
Right.
He was supposed to have a cellmate at all times, but he didn't. His cellmate had been transferred out.
And the guards, Noel and Thomas.
They failed to conduct their mandatory counts at 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. They were, according to the investigation, shopping for furniture online, browsing the internet, and sleeping. And then they falsified the official records to show that they had done the checks.
And we have testimony from a materials handler, a guy named Bonhomme, who said he was asleep during his shift.
He was asleep. He was asleep. He testified that he was asleep and therefore denied seeing anyone enter the tier. But again, if you were asleep, your testimony about not seeing anyone is completely worthless.
So we have a federal high-security facility where the cameras are glitching, the guards are either sleeping or faking logs, and the highest-profile prisoner in the country is left totally alone with a paper uniform and a bedsheet.
It created the perfect storm for something to happen. Whether that storm was deliberately engineered or was just the result of extreme systemic negligence, the end result is exactly the same. The truth died in that cell with him.
So we're nearing the end of our road trip. We have driven through the documents, the money, the politics, and the prison. What does it all mean? Where have we arrived?
Let's do a final editorial reflection here. What withstands scrutiny? What do we know for sure?
Okay, I'll start. What we know for sure is this. Jeffrey Epstein ran a sophisticated and horrific trafficking operation. It was facilitated by vast wealth, and he was protected for years by a legal system that prioritized his checkbook justice, that NPA over the rights of his victims. That is a fact.
Absolutely. That is fact. We also know as a fact that the prison system failed to monitor him, leading directly to his death. That is not in dispute.
Okay, but then what remains contested? What's still murky?
The definitive manner of death. It's still contested. The medical evidence fights with the circumstantial opportunity. You have an expert like Baden looking at the body and saying homicide, and you have the DOJ looking at the circumstances and saying suicide, and then you have the wild card of the orange figure that might be an inmate or might be laundry. That is fundamentally unresolved.
And the who knew what question among the elite.
Plausible deniability versus direct complicity. How much did all those famous people really know? The Black Book says they were in his orbit. The emails say they knew about the wild parties. But proving criminal intent, proving they knew about the trafficking for each individual, that remains the deep gray area.
So why does this matter to you, listening at home? Why should anyone still care in 2026?
Because this case exposes the two-tiered justice system more clearly than any other case in modern history. It shows the extreme vulnerability of truth when incredible power and money are involved. And it shows that accountability is often limited to the immediate perpetrator. Epstein is dead. Ghislaine Maxwell is in jail. The ecosystem that supported them.
Yeah.
The banks that processed the million-dollar fees. The politicians who flew on the plane. The lawyers who crafted the sweetheart deal. That ecosystem is largely intact.
The machine just keeps running.
The machine keeps running.
I want to leave everyone listening with one final thought. Just something to mull over.
Go for it.
It's that orange figure, 10:39 p.m. Whether it was a man in a jumpsuit or a guard with a pile of sheets. The fact that two different federal agencies, the FBI and the OIG, looked at the exact same piece of video evidence and saw two completely different things, that right there tells you everything you need to know about the reliability of any official narrative in this case.
We see what we're told to see, or maybe we just see what we want to see.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And until we see the unedited, unvarnished truth, the road trip continues.
It certainly does.
Thank you for riding along with us on this journey. It wasn't an easy ride, but I think it was a necessary one.
Always.
If you want to dig into some of these documents yourself, we've linked the 2026 release notes in the description. We've also linked the Dechert report and that great Mother Jones analysis.
Please read them. Don't just take our word for it.
Join us next time for the next installment of the road trip. Stay curious.
And stay skeptical.